Hello and welcome to the latest Meet the Manager video from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. In this series, we will be interviewing managers with a strong track record of success over their Fantasy Premier League career. We'll be finding out their strategies for success and gather some tips on how to tackle the current campaign. Today, I'm joined by Phil Ampleford, who is also known as Philman on social media and at Fantasy Football Scouts. Phil is currently in the top 3,000 and has had 7 top 10,000 finishes in his 9 previous seasons. Among these, he's finished in the top 1,000 on 2 occasions. Phil, welcome. How are you?
Good evening, Joe. I'm very well. How are yourself? You okay?
Yes, I'm good. I'm about to record the Scoutcast as well,
I
so
know,
I'm quite
it's
excited
really
about that.
something.
Gives me a chance to talk about my wildcard team. But enough of me. Let's move on to you. So first of all, what I like to do in these is have a look at your career history, and I think there's a lot to chat about here. Firstly, this incredible run between 2011 and 2016, when 6,000 was your lowest rank. Secondly, last season's relatively poor finish of 95k, and thirdly, you bounced back from that and are currently in the top 3,000. So, in the, you're vying as well. I noticed as well in FPL General, he has a league called the Elite 64. It's the toughest league I know. I can get green arrows in all my other leagues, and I'll get a red arrow in that league. It's so tough. But you are vying for the top in there as well. So, looking at all those top finishes, were there any common strategies that you deployed during that run? And I'm looking for kind of strategies for success in getting that really high finish.
Um, well, that's the million-dollar question, as always, with these things. It's not always easy to identify what you do. I'd say I'm mostly a dullard manager, but with maverick tendencies. So I'm not averse to risk taking, and that kind of makes I feel I'm able to perhaps adapt a bit more to different types of seasons, because every season is different. So that's, I think, one of the keys. Um, Starting with a good template game week one. So starting with the sort of the template of game week one, going with what a lot of people choose. So you've got a good base. Then you can make the difference after that. So don't try and be too maverick at the start. Try and go with a lot of well-owned players. The template that's kind of defined, because we just don't know what we haven't got much information to work on at that stage. So you don't want to make any sort of big risks, possibly, that put you behind the 8 ball very early on. I've always tried to maximise my funds on the first 11 that start the game. I always generally have a 4 million defender who may or may not play. I'm not bothered whether he really does or not, as long as hopefully he retains his value. Then I'll either have a very cheap midfielder or striker, a 4.5 million player. So I'm maximising my first 11. And that's one of the mistakes I made at the start of this year. Unfortunately, I got Kenny in at 5 million. I had so I got 8 playing players rather than the sort of 7 that I would normally concentrate on.
I was just going to say that I always think whenever I look at my team after about this stage, really, kind of game weeks, kind of 5, 6, 7, I always look at my team and I think, how much more money can I eke out of those cheap players? So I'm always looking. Say, for example, if I didn't own Wan-Bissaka or the Wolves defender Bennett, these are gold players. These starting
Absolutely.
players who are 4 million. So that's the kind of thing that you think that managers should be looking at early on, really maximising those funds.
Yeah,
So
I mean, we're very lucky with Wan-Bissaka this year. That's enabled us to have, well, for me, to have him, another 4 million defender, and then maximise even more of my funds into midfield and attack, and also to actually spend money in defence as well on sort of free premium defenders, which is what I started with, the famous sort of Mendy, Robertson, and I had Saka as well from Crystal Palace at the time, but then I got in Alonso on top of that. I'm quite aggressive with my transfers at the start of the season. You know, when you've got less rotation, you've got less injuries, potentially less suspensions. You can generally take a bit more aggressive approach to getting them in early, maximising your team value. But then what I generally tend to do after Christmas normally is I tend to start making later transfers. You built up that team value. It doesn't generally make much difference after the Christmas, but you've got to be more cautious because there's a lot more fatigue, and then rotation, that kind of thing. So you've got to be a bit more careful with your transfers. I generally make ones nearer the deadlines later in the season. I've always been one for looking at fixtures rather than form. Generally, I find that form will follow fixtures. Possibly that's that, but I've always been one for looking at fixtures. I'm big on defensive rotations, which I think once they sort of Champions League kicks in, we'll have to look at getting a bit more cheap in defence and getting more nail players and having teams that rotate well with each other. So you can maybe have a couple, 1 or 2 premium defenders and then rotate the others. And also, if you set your defence well early, it's something I like to not do so many transfers, and including goalkeepers as well. Set the goalkeepers defence early, and then you can concentrate more on your transfers on forwards and midfielders where their form is more important.
Is that the case? Because obviously, so for example, we'll talk in detail about this season a bit later, but a good example is coming up at the moment. So those with, say, Salah, and perhaps looking at getting Kane in, you can, with 2 free transfers, you can make that move, you can free up those funds. But all you're doing is essentially you're kind of swapping one premium asset with bad fixtures for a premium asset with good fixtures. So just use that as an example. I'm not especially asking you to endorse Kane.
Also, you've got with the midfielders and forwards, I think form is also possibly a little bit more of an important factor. So you wouldn't necessarily swap in players in and out if you think they're still able to score well in the harder fixtures. One thing I didn't say also is I think it's been mentioned a lot before about having these price points throughout your squad as well, so you can make easy moves between different players in the same price brackets. So I know it's been mentioned before enough. I think it's very important as well to have a good structure to your team.
It's that, and I always think that gives flexibility. Trigger Lips that we interviewed last time on Meet the Manager said exactly the same thing, and this is, I think, one of the interesting things that hopefully will come out of this as we interview more and more managers. Certain similar themes will emerge, and we'll find when we meet the manager, perhaps at the end of the season, we'll have formulated the perfect manager from you all. But one thing I am interested in as well, looking at kind of strategy as well, is the number of hits that you've taken this season already. So you've taken 4 hits, game week 3, 4, 5, 6, and hits. Now, don't necessarily need to know what players they are and something, but throughout your career, is that something you've been keen to do at this stage of the season? So, for example, some of these seasons where you got 365, 779, were you quite happy to take lots of hits, or were you quite hit averse?
Neither. I wouldn't say I was happy taking the hits. I wouldn't say I was hit averse. I think I'm kind of a mixture of both, really. You take each situation as it comes. If you think a hit will make the difference, it doesn't always. You can get it wrong, but if you feel that the hit is justified, it looks good in the short term and the medium term, I don't mind doing that. I would say take a -8 a couple of times a season, possibly. I also like to do the bit where you save a free transfer, then the following week do like a mini wild card where you do 3 free transfers to -4. So I don't have any set rules. I don't say I'm not one for not doing transfers, not one for doing loads. I just kind of play it by ear. But certainly I don't really have any principles on that at all.
And in terms of looking at that career, then looking at that standout 95,000, what happened that season? What mistakes happened? But more importantly, what did you learn from it? And I'm saying what did you learn from it because you clearly did, because you're in the top 3,000 now. So what did you take from that?
Well, I think I've learned from it. I mean, obviously the start, it's only 6 game weeks. I've had one really good game week, which has kind of, propelled me up the ranks. I think having had such a good year the previous year, I think I maybe tried to do something a bit different. I think I tried to maybe a bit more maverick in my game week 1 team, which went badly wrong. I got dropped down the ranks quite a long way. Sometimes it's hard to recover from if you've got a really bad team, but you're not necessarily feel it's bad enough to wild card. I also made a decision for some reason now that I wouldn't chase price updates. I wouldn't chase the price changes. I'd try and just make sure I made good, solid transfers, because I've always seen people who win it in the past have never had great team value. So is it really something that's as important as I think it is? And it was. It turned out that I couldn't get the players I wanted to get later in the season, and that failed as well. Then I think I started chasing the game, making poor choices. And another thing, I remember the chips at the end of the year, end of the season. I tried to do it differently than other people. I remember I took a free hit in game week 34, where most people were doing the bench boost. I got in Sanchez as my captain, who played a bit of one game and got me 1 point. And I had my free hit score was awful, so where I should be making the difference, where people have used their chips, where people have given up on the games, I should be propelling up the ranks at the end like we tried to do. I was going nowhere. I was actually falling. I was going week 34. I had a red arrow with a free hit. So that was it just was a series of things. I didn't really play the game that I used to play, and the strategies I used to employ. I just went against them all and
So that's
just made it.
really interesting, because in a way that's just completely your strategy, the way you play the game has been completely vindicated, because you tried to do something different, and
Yeah,
pretty much on every level it went wrong.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, given that, it's actually remarkable that you actually did finish in the top 100.
Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, when you have a bad start, you fall behind. If you just do the patient game, as Tricklips mentioned last week, you play the patient game. You keep to your sort of like the way you play the game, the way you enjoy the game as well, and you should make steady progress. But I think I just panicked. I made bad choices, and these things tend to snowball as well. I tend to find if you get a good rhythm going in your team, you can make good progress as well. So it's never happened for me.
Because that's quite interesting, the psychology behind it as well, about how you deal with the success and the failures as well. And I mean, I've been in a similar situation with you with a bad season, and I've done exactly the same thing. You start chasing suddenly, players like Andy Carroll and Giroud are suddenly in my team, and I don't know how it's happened, and yeah, it all goes a bit wrong. But then I look at some other managers, and as clearly you have done for the previous seasons, and you're doing this season, is you're not panicking, you're just keeping it slow and steady and sticking to the game plan. How do you think you've adapted though? Taking away, last season, but just in general over the seasons, what do you think has changed about the game, and how have you adapted to that?
Well, I also think another bad thing about last year was I felt last year was a real first year of explosion of social media with fantasy football. There was so much information coming at you, and I think I had Facebook groups, WhatsApp groups, Fantasy Football Scout, obviously chat rooms, all sorts of information, and I didn't really make the most of it. I didn't really filter out the good information from the bad information, and it just got a bit too much. It kind of became a bit too much consuming with with my thoughts, and I couldn't really work with it properly. So I think one thing I've done this year is I've taken a step back, gone a bit more casual. Even I've been sort of threatening people I speak to and chat with, going a bit more casual this year, taking a bit less easy. Saturday mornings I'm out and about. I've set my team on a Friday, and I'll kind of forget about it all, and just taking it a bit more easy really, and just trying to filter out where the good bits of information are coming from, where I know the good sources of information are, and use those. But there is a lot of good information out there that you can basically take bits and pieces of, and then come to your own decisions, go with your gut instinct, and make your choices.
What about things like, say, for example, formation? Now, there was a lot of talk last season and this season about going 4, even 5 at the back, and there was lots of research at the end of the season that showed that actually the most successful teams, if you'd have just gone through that method, almost like a robotic of just picking the best players, it was a 4 at the back, or even a 5 at the back formation. Has that changed for you at all over the last couple of 2 or 3 seasons? You're looking at wing backs and those types, less strikers being deployed, those types of things.
Well, certainly the wing backs, the bonus points as well, tend to go more to these defenders that are a bit more out of position than previous years. I still think if you're going to go, if you're going to go invest more in the back, it's still about getting the right players though. It's all well and good investing for the back, but if you get the players wrong, it's still not going to necessarily do you any good. And I think it's almost easier to pick the players that will do well in midfield and attack. So that's why we all still generally would play a 3-4-3 or 3-5-2 over a 4-4-2. Or 4 or 5 at the back. So it's all. I'd agree that there are more sort of points per value, points per million on the defenders, but you've got to get the right ones, and that's not necessarily as easy as getting midfielders and forwards. So I still don't think I'll end up going that way. I think I'll still stay with a 3-4-3, 3-5-2 type of formation myself.
I was looking at this season. We'll look at your team in a minute, but I had a peek at your team on the FPL Statistico website, which I do urge people to have a look at. And I was quite surprised. One of the reasons I asked that question is because, yes, 3-4-3, that so far this season you've used that 4 times, and it's been your most successful. You've averaged 84.3 points, but you have also used a 4-4-2 and a 4-3-3. Now sometimes that's because substitutions are made, it's not particularly your choice, but you've done quite well with them. 62 points you got from that one use of 4-4-2, not a bad score, of 59 for 4-3-3. do you think even though 3-4-3 is what you're used to, it's the way you're doing things, do you think you will be deploying a kind of more of a 4-4-2 type arrangement in future?
Probably not, because I always have that non-playing fifth defender, so it generally makes my structure a bit more rigid to a 3-5-2 or 3-4-3. Occasionally, if the fourth defender, all four defenders have a good fixture, you would possibly use it. I generally, because of that non-playing play, I like to just limit my. It's a good place to save money for me. That's generally something I don't think I'll deploy very frequently.
And what's your general rules about captaincy as well? Some people like to take risks. Some people like to go with the kind of usual suspects. So what's your take on the captaincy?
It generally does follow the polls, not necessarily intentionally, but I tend to agree with them, obviously, because that's what polls do. They generally show you who people think is the best captain. Very occasionally, I'll take a risk, with a defender. I know I've captained Baines in the past, which some people might cringe at.
Now,
I even remember Captain Ashley Cole once, because
I was going to say, because one of your most successful moves this season. So you've captained Salah 3 times, and you've averaged 16 points from him, from that. So he's been steady. Aguero 2 times, you've averaged 13 points. And get this, Mendy captained game week 2 against Huddersfield.
Yeah, that was the week where we all heard the rumbles on social media about Aguero possibly not playing. I was 50-50 at the time anyway. My feeling was Man City were at home to Huddersfield. The chance of Huddersfield scoring were very low. So I got a guaranteed, I thought, clean sheet out of Man City plus attacking possibilities of Mendy. I thought it was a really good captain choice. Unfortunately, Huddersfield scored that, and then Aguero got 20 points. So I did actually lose out that week by being a bit more maverick.
But you still got 16 points from him.
Yeah, it was 1 point less than Salah, or the same number of points as Salah.
I was going to say I went Salah because I'm really quite dull, but I just enjoyed it. Just really stood out. My immediate thought when I heard those Aguero rumours was not go to Mendy. So as you said, you've done Ashley Cole before, Baines. So it's those types of quite attacking, kind of almost like wing back, full back players.
Yeah. Well, I just thought that was just an ideal time to be honest with you, Aguero didn't look very good game week 1, so I wasn't totally convinced he would do well. And they say there was that rumblings. I was 50-50 before the rumblings. That just made my choice. Okay. And I was really quite confident. With the clean sheet as well, I thought it was a really good chance to score well out of a defender. I know you didn't even mention his name on the captain the video that I saw. But you did mention Alonso on the following one, so it's it just a left field one. I thought I'd try out. I didn't think I'd lose out as much as I did.
No, that was our error. We should have been consulting. I should have been doing Meet the Manager before that. I would have put him in. Let's have a look at your current team. Well, this is, essentially the team that you went into game week 6 with. So just have a look at it. Now, you haven't used any chips yet. You haven't wildcarded.
No, not wildcard. I generally find a wildcard, it tends to become obvious when to use it, and for me, it's never really come into my mind about using it. Perhaps in hindsight, last week might have been a good time, but I didn't feel the need. I knew my team would probably, with the fixtures on that week, I wouldn't have a great week last week, but it looked good for this week onwards, so it was I was prepared for that.
Do you have any plans to wildcard? Do you have it in the back of your mind, or just none at the moment?
It's always in the back of the mind, but I feel that near the time it will become obvious when I should use it, and that time hasn't arrived yet. Possibly game week 10 was one I looked at, but I've really not thought a great deal about it. In the old days when we had one wild card, it was great that I always felt leaving it till the back end of the season was always a really good strategy. So I'm happy not thinking about it and not worrying about it right now. But then again, I've been lucky. I've got a squad together that's done quite well. So when that happens, you generally don't have to worry so much about the wild card anyway.
So taking what you've already told us about your kind of strategies for success and taking into account when it went wrong and you didn't follow them. Looking at this team, this is a perfect example of this is a Philman team here. So you've got your Alonso there. And then you're looking at fixtures. Now, Leicester have got great fixtures. So in you go with Chilwell there. He's bound to get some clean sheets. But Leicester are bound to get some clean sheets eventually. But then you've gone for Wan-Bissaka. You've got the value there. And you've got Doherty there. So also you've got the fixtures. They've got great fixtures. And they're they've got multiple points routes as well. It's a really nice backline with Patricio there, who you're just going to play every week, so that you got Hammer in
Set
there.
and forget, yeah.
And I like that. I like that defence there. What's if you could change anything about your defence over the coming weeks? Is there any changes you'd make?
Well, I must admit, Chilwell was the one transfer I made that I really wasn't entirely sure about. It was a kind of it was between him and Trent Alexander-Arnold. I've got that. Well, I got it wrong over 1 week. We'll see over the future weeks. I had the gut feeling that he might be rested, and that was really kind of the wrong feeling to have. I think he would have been good to have in there because Liverpool's fixtures turn better after another couple of game weeks. So maybe could have put him in there. And play him if I need to, bench him if he's got a real tough fixture. But then again, even with his attacking statistics, he could still do well in a tough fixture. So Chilwell, I'm not so. I just needed to find a 5 million defender so I could afford to upgrade Ings to Mitrovic last week, which worked well. Hopefully Chilwell will come good.
I was going to say, as a fixtures man as well, if Chilwell doesn't come good, even despite Leicester's good fixtures, are you looking at the likes of, say, Newcastle and Brighton? Have a huge fixture turn.
Well, I say that. What I think now is when now the Champions League is coming in, we're going to get a bit more rotation in the bigger teams. I think the way forward is to possibly look at these lower teams. So in defence, having a bigger rotation, possibly having one big player and three on a rotation, which I think works really well. I've always liked working that way with lower teams because they're more nailed as well. They haven't got the European football to worry about, and it's the same in midfield as well. You've got and up front, you've got a lot of cheap or mid-price midfielders and forwards that are basically much more rotation proof. So I think going forwards, we're going to be looking at more of those players, and the likes of our Agueros and our Salahs. Are they going to be getting a bit more rotation for the easy fixtures? And so that's something that I think is different now than at the start of the season. We could go heavy on these players knowing they play every game, but I think that could change going forwards.
Looking at your midfield there, now you've got a lot of flexibility here. You've got a lot of wiggle room because you've got Hazard, David Silva and Salah. You've got Fraser there for that value, good fixtures as well. So of any of those ones, David Silva, Salah, Hazard, are there any of the ones you're happy with them at the moment, or can you see yourself moving any of them on?
I think, like a lot of people, I'm thinking about selling Salah and maybe getting Kane in with the money. That's a thing I'm thinking about. Maybe even this week. Don't know yet. It's one to think about. Hazard, I think he's going to be, because Chelsea are Europa. He's going to be much less rotation. I think he's going to be much more rotation unlikely. Sort of bad phrase there.
No,
so I think
that makes sense to me. Rotation unlikely.
I think for him, I think he stays in my team because I think he's going to be a good source of points. He always does well after a new manager comes in. He's looking on form. He's looking happy where he plays, not the false nine anymore. I think he could be a good source of points and some that's not going to be rotated a lot. So I think he stays for the foreseeable, unless he shows a big dip in form, which I don't think he does. So I think he's going to be different from the previous years. So he stays for me. David Silva, I was a bit surprised he was benched last week. So he's saying I got on monitor. He's been benched. Sorry, he's playing, I believe, tonight in the Carabao Cup. So that's also a bit worrying. Fraser looks good for the foreseeable, and he's cheap enough to ride any fixture shifts as well. Obviously, Richarlison and Maddison are players I'd like to get in, but you can't have them all.
No.
But possibly bringing one of those two in the Salah and then upgrading maybe Zaha to Kane is on my thoughts. But again, that's another -4.
No, I was going to say, looking at your front line here, I mean, Aguero, I think he has to stay. He's done nothing to warrant being ditched as well. And
so far,
Mitrovic as well he's just. I mean, you've been playing for a number of years. Do you remember Darren Bent when he was playing back at Sunderland? And he was basically started about 6-5, 7. And he just scored every other game. He was getting, and it's a bit like that. It's kind of a good striker that's really good value for. To be fair to Fulham, not the greatest of sides. I mean, they're good, but they're not the greatest of sides. And he just looks at absolutely. He's going to rocket in value.
He is fantasy gold. is kind of the talisman of the team, and I think having talisman of the team is always a good thing to have, because they're more nailed, they're more likely to get a higher goal involvement for those teams as well. So the Hazards, people like Pascal Gross from last season, he was the talisman of Brighton, even though they didn't necessarily score lots of points, but they did. He was involved. Those kind of players that they're cheaper and they've got higher involvement as well, and they're talisman of the team, so they're always good players to have. So the Maddison, Vardy's looking good as well. He's someone I think we should all be looking at possibly as well. But he's that little bit cheaper. So how does he fit in with your price structure?
Well, Phil, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. What's been really interesting, and I hope that the viewers get from this as well, is that you have certain strategies for success, which have been proven season after season, and then when you didn't follow your own strategies, it just went all to pot.
Indeed.
But you're back on track now, and looking at your team, it's a Philman team. So good luck with the next game week, and good luck with the season, Phil. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much, Joe. Really enjoyed it. Cheers. Thank you.